It's an understatement to say that we at USRA have a special interest in the moon. Our founding 49 years ago was linked to the establishment of the Lunar Science Institute in Houston, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary a week and a half ago. This was the forerunner to the Lunar and Planetary Institute, which USRA still manages for NASA and which serves the broad lunar and planetary science community. Today, just like during the Apollo era, partnerships will be a critical component for success. Not just to get us back to the moon, but to take full advantage of our presence there, both scientifically and technologically, and to enable continuing exploration beyond cislunar space. So on behalf of USRA and our member universities, nearly 60 of which are represented here, I'd like to thank our speakers and panelists for volunteering their time to participate in these discussions. I'd especially like to thank Robert Lightfoot, NASA's acting administrator, who will give the Tarantino Memorial Address. The late Fred Tarantino was USRA's 5th president, and he put great emphasis on strengthening USRA's interactions with its member universities and this symposium in particular. We honor Fred's legacy with this keynote. In addition, I'd like to thank Professor Henry HERTZFELD, the director of the Space Policy Institute at the George Washington University, for organizing this symposium, which is our 9th done in collaboration with GW. I'd also like to thank our own Steve Mackwell for his role in helping to organize this. So with that, Henry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. And on behalf of the Space Policy Institute, we're very pleased to have co-hosted this event with USRA. What is not often well understood is that, of course, NASA has always encouraged partnerships with academia, industry, with, and internationally, and in fact, over 80%, well over, of NASA's expenditures have always been with the contractors, grantees, and international partners. And that's the way NASA's accomplished its highly successful programs, really since the agency began in 1958. Today, the nature of these partnerships is changing, reflecting many changes in government and society that include the maturity of space technologies, the improved research capabilities of universities and other institutions, including USRA, and the burgeoning interest in space from a multitude of nations and, of course, from private companies. We look forward to this afternoon to hearing from our very distinguished speakers whose cumulative experience dates back to the early years of the Apollo program and even before that, I think, in some cases. So my first order of business is to introduce Robert Lightfoot, who will be giving the Frederick Tarantino Memorial Address. Throughout the afternoon, I'm going to try to be very short on bios because we have a compacted, very excellent program. I want to give the speakers the maximum amount of time to speak, and the bios are printed in the brochures that you have. But Robert has been, of course, NASA's acting administrator since January of 2017, last year. His career as an engineer at Marshall Space Flight Center, and he rose from starting there to being director of Marshall before coming to Washington. And he's received so many awards at NASA and been responsible for the success and key contributions, again, to many of NASA's program missions. His bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama, now serves on the University of Alabama's Mechanical Engineering Advisory Board, and in 2010 was inducted into the state of Alabama's Engineering Hall of Fame. We're delighted to have you here, Robert, and turn the podium over to you. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It is great to be here. What a great event. What an exciting event, too, when you think about where we are from a national perspective and an international perspective with our discussion about returning back to the moon. It's also good to share the stage here with such a distinguished panel that's coming later, and my good friend David Parker from ESA is here as well, and of course, one of our NASA heroes, Harrison Schmitt. You know, at NASA, we're always looking to the future. We have been, of course, that's what we do. We think we are the future. We try to make it the impossible possible all the time and turn it into reality. And I think what we're working at today in this longer view that we're trying to approach as an agency, I think really does begin to crystallize itself when you think about what we got in this budget and the involvement we've had from the administration going forward. And I wanted to walk through some of that today to give you a feel for what we're trying to do. So think about the long game, not the short game, right? And that's hard to do sometimes. All right, thank you. I feel better. So there's only 5 of them now. That's good. Okay, so so what I wanted to do is talk bring up a few points around how we got to the point we got to with our budget this year that obviously turned the focus back to getting to the moon, taking people to the moon, and even in the lunar vicinity as we move forward. So, you know, I was fortunate enough to be acting administrator during a time when we reestablished the National Space Council. And our first National Space Council meeting probably is where this started for us in terms of the administration expressing their interest in what we want to do from an overall perspective of going back to the moon. And if you remember, I got the action from Vice President Pence to return to the moon and take 45 days and bring a plan. So that was, for us, that was a very exciting opportunity. What was even better, though, was when we gave the plan to the administration, it actually showed up in the budget, codified in the budget that went forward. A lot of times we do plans and they end up on a shelf somewhere, but this was a case where the plan that we presented, with some variations that, of course, the administration was interested in, became part of our $19.9 billion budget submit. Now, obviously, this past week we got an appropriations for 2018 from Congress at 20.7. So the 19.9 that was really good before that appropriations. Now I got to go argue why it's less than what they gave us this year. But I'll get a chance to say, hey, that's great. Tell us what you're going to give us in October, and maybe we can focus that in. So hopefully we'll get through that budget process this year, and I expect us to see some continuity going forward in terms of our planning. The neat thing about the Space Council so far is the genuine interest from the Vice President in what we're doing. And I think we had several discussions. I've had several discussions with him personally on what we're doing. Scott Pace is here. I saw him a minute ago. And Scott is the executive secretary for the Space Council. The value proposition for NASA in terms of what we do and what we're doing to try to push this administration agenda actually works out pretty well. And so we spent a lot of time before the administration got here kind of teeing up the message to them that, hey, we're NASA. Our job is to, frankly, rewrite textbooks. We're supposed to be making the discoveries that no one else makes. We're supposed to be pushing humans further into space than anyone else, right? That's what we do. And that's kind of our day job. And that's what most people think we do on a daily basis. But actually, when you talk to the administration, there's some other key tenets that NASA brings that brings to the table. And these resonated actually pretty well with the administration. I felt very good about the way we had teed them up. The first one is we're an arm of the foreign policy of this nation. NASA has over 800 agreements with over 120 countries. What we do is an international and a global endeavor. Almost all of our science missions now have an international component, or we're with our international partners as we go forward. Our human space flight, I mean, clearly the International Space Station is the perfect example of that. But anything we do in human space flight going forward is going to be international. Our aeronautics mission directorate, same way. We're sharing so much internationally now and participating together as a unit. We just become an arm of that foreign policy as we move forward. The other thing that we're a very big part of is the industrial base of this nation. The aerospace and defense industrial base, while we're only 0.4 of 1% of the total budget in the federal government, we are a pretty significant part of the aerospace and defense portion of that. We all saw that in the sequestration in 2013 when that shared infrastructure got stretched pretty thin as we all started learning going forward. But our goal here is to establish more industry, get more people involved in what we're trying to do. So if you look at our emphasis on public-private partnerships and bringing new players into this bringing more emerging companies into what we're trying to do from an industry perspective, it's exactly what we want to do. And I think it's important for us to be part of that domestic policy part of strengthening and securing the nation's industrial base. The other thing that we do is we address societal challenges. And I think this is what makes us different, right? When you think about NASA, if you think about the first N in NASA, it stands for national. And so this is where we really come into play, where we're different than, say, industry or academia or we have a national need to actually take our technologies and give them out. We want to give them away. We want to engage different communities, whether it's academia, industry. We want them engaged in what we're trying to do as a nation. And I think that's a specific piece we play, and I can give you, many examples of technologies that have made their way into into different places around the globe that we develop, but we want to give those out, and we want to inspire or engage the rest of the world in what we're doing. And then the final piece that we bring, I think, is and when I say NASA, we, I mean the entire team. It's all of us. It's the NASA team. It's our industry partners. It's the academia. It's all the folks that are involved in this. We really are a spotlight for inspiration and leadership. And I think, you know, I'm going to steal a story. Hopefully I'm not stealing Jack's story here. But a young man just walked up to Jack a minute ago and goes, I got a photograph signed when I was 10 years old. And he says, I'll always remember that, of you on the moon. And he said, it inspired me to be part of this and be in this community. That's what we do. Those kind of events don't happen very often. And the civilization level discoveries and knowledge that we gain is something NASA can bring, I think, to an overall view, not only for the nation, but for the globe. And I go back to when Neil Armstrong and Buzz landed on the moon. If you go back and you look at above the fold, when we had newspapers, we don't have so many newspapers anymore, but above the fold, the headlines were, "We did it," all over the world. It wasn't NASA, wasn't the U.S., it was the globe. It was a global endeavor that we reached. And I think that leadership and inspiration is so important because, you know, we live in a time when we talk about what we can't do a lot more than what we can do. And yet this is something we can do. This journey of exploration is something we do on a routine basis. So when we brought all those tenets to the administration, I think they really, frankly, bought into what we're talking about, and they accepted a whole lot of those tenets and gave us the charge with this 45-day study to come back and bring a plan to getting us back to the moon. Now what that plan did in my mind is, if you go back in time, you'll see that we've been talking about a journey to Mars for a while. Now we didn't give up on Mars in this plan, right? We still have our cornerstone of the International Space Station, which I talk with my hands, so I apologize, but this is Earth and this is Mars. So you just get used to it, right? Because I'm going to move across that spectrum here. So when we talk about what we're doing in low Earth orbit with the International Space Station, it's the cornerstone. This is our jumping off point for what we want to do. We're learning so much there, whether it's the technologies we need to take humans further into space, or whether it's just what's happening to the human body and how the human body adapts to the microgravity environment, and what we're going to need to do from a countermeasures and protocol perspective as we go further out, right? Then we would talk about what we're going to do at Mars. And what we have always said is the decade of the 2020s was a little bit uncertain. We didn't know exactly what missions we wanted to do. We weren't sure what we wanted to do. We knew we needed to go to the area around the moon, at least, and practice is the word I use. But test the systems out. Make sure the systems were ready to go. Learn from the moon. Is there something we can use from the moon? You know, the resources that are there, what can we actually depend on those? Let's go see if we can do that, because it's a lot easier to do it at the moon than it is at Mars, right? And that's just the simple truth of it. So I think what this budget did for us is it actually proposed, it kind of filled in the blanks in that decade of the 2020s, and it allowed us to still keep an eye on Mars. So when you look forward to what we're going to be doing, again, International Space Station is our cornerstone. We'll continue to stay there through 2024, and we'll work on what's that transition plan getting off of the station as we go forward, because we want to take the investment that we have today in the station, and we want to actually use that investment to keep going further and see if we can actually turn that tide. Cislunar space now is the real focus for us. That exploration agenda is so important for us. We want to, and we're going to do it in several ways. The first set of ways is going to be a series of more capable landers. The first ones will be very small that we'll send there. We'll hopefully use our commercial partners in academia to do that, to just go get back there and start scouting. I call them the scouts. They're going to go back and scout the area so we know where we want to go. The second set of landers will build off of those, and they're going to go there hopefully to start seeing what can we prospect the resources that are there. Can we actually get this stuff out of there? I see Jason Crusan over here. Jason's been very involved with this since day one in terms of helping us try to plan that out. And then the third lander is going to build off of that, and it's hopefully going to be the one that takes humans down. But the cool part about this is, while we're doing all that, you've got to look at the whole infrastructure, or the whole architecture we're talking about. We're also going to put a lunar orbiting platform, or a gateway, up there. What that allows us to do is actually take these landers potentially from the moon to the gateway. I don't have to launch one every time from the U.S. I can actually do things back and forth from there, which makes that architecture a little more resilient, a little more reusable from that standpoint. It gives us the gateway is actually also movable. We can move it around the moon and change the inclination to whatever we need to do. If we need to telerobotically operate stuff on the moon, we can do that. It will not be full-time human presence there. It'll be just what we call human tended, where people can come and go from that platform and actually use it as a destination to go there. What's really important to us for that, with this as I say, the item R, it's the next step, is that platform actually allows us to potentially come and go to Mars from there. It's in a pretty good inclination. There's pretty good orbital mechanics around that. And so we think this is an exciting piece of that infrastructure as we go forward. So that whole architecture is very important. And it's going to take our international partners. It's going to take U.S. industry. It's going to take academia getting folks ready to come to our workforce to get ready to participate in this. But that's the plan. That's the overall architecture that we're looking at for human spaceflight. But what's probably unique, at least since I've been in NASA, is this is being worked, the human spaceflight side of our house, Bill Gerstenmaier, and the science side of our house, Thomas Zubrcken, and the space technology side of our house, Steve Jerzik, and now Jim Ryder, are like this, right? They are making sure they're synced up. We're not doing a single mission to the moon that doesn't consider technology, science, and the human, what we need from a human perspective. That's pretty exciting. It doesn't mean we're always going to have one that has all three elements, but we're at least considering them before we even launch. And to me, that's the most important thing we've done in a while, is we're very integrated from that standpoint. And every one of them could give this same talk. That's a pretty exciting time for us. I haven't seen us do that in the agency in a while. So I think that's really, really clear what we're doing. And we're making a lot of progress on the systems that we need. So I've been talking about this for a while. I've kind of got the, I call them the 7 Ps, right? And so I think the first, when I talk about these Ps, this is what allows us to actually, that I have confidence in we're going to accomplish this. We're going to get back to the moon. We're going to return to the moon, as this says. And so when I think about the 7 Ps, it actually comes out of what we learned from the Space Council with the Space Policy Directive 1. That gave us our purpose. We have a good purpose. It builds off of the Transition Authorization Act of 2017. I mean, there's some things that aren't perfectly aligned, but they're very close, a lot closer than we've had in the past. It's no big major shift. That purpose allows us to actually say, you know, we are going back to the moon. We're filling in that decade of the 2020s with several missions, and those missions are all going to push us toward, ultimately, we'll get to the moon, but we'll also go to Mars. And it's not just human exploration, it's the science that we can do there as well. And don't get hung up on the fact that we do, that it's all lunar science. There's a lot of things you can do from the Gateway. A lot of things that aren't lunar science related. And we had a conference here recently in Denver that actually highlighted that. There's a lot of different, once people start thinking, you get out of the box that we're in and you start thinking about the capabilities, it's really amazing what can happen. The second P for me is policy. We were able to have a policy directive from the President. We were able to have the Transition Authorization Act from Congress. Again, we continue to see almost a perfect storm of getting those kind of things in place. The next one is progress. We're making a lot of progress. I mean, the International Space Station continues to be this great jumping off point for us for learning about what's happening to people, what happened to technologies, the things that we need to do. Our commercial partners are making great progress on supplying the International Space Station, and hopefully in the next year we'll have our first flights of humans on those commercial capabilities as well. In the meantime, Space Launch System and Orion continue to make progress. They're going to be our transportation infrastructure, the backbone that allows us to get to and from the moon and to the Gateway. We're making great progress on our power propulsion element, which is going to be the first piece of the Gateway going forward. So it's really exciting to see the progress that's being made to actually do this. And I think just opening up the aperture for us in terms of what can happen in the decade of the 2020s. You know, I think that the next P for me is our people. And that's you guys in this room as well as our NASA team and your teams back at home. The people are ready to do this. They're excited. I can tell you I haven't seen morale as high as I've seen it in a long time in the agency, and it's just fun to go see folks, and they love to show you what they're doing. They love to show you what they're working on. It's just amazing, and I think they will be able to do that. And again, that synergy between Bill Gerstenmaier, Thomas Zubrcken, and Steve Jerzik, now Jim Ryder, is just amazing to see what they're doing, and they've got their teams all psyched up, and so it's not just our budget process and everything we do stovepipes us. It just automatically does it the way the money flows. We're having to really mechanically make sure we're not getting stovepiped, and so we've done that we have Tom Crimmins who works for me in the A Suite. I've given him the job of strategic alignment. Nice, but two beautiful buzzwords, right? Strategic alignment. But he's done it, right? He's keeping these guys synced up, and it's just fun to watch each of them as they go forward. The next next P for me is passion, right? Not only are people ready to go do it, they got a passion about what they want to do. And I think everybody around here has a passion. And I think there's a huge, a swell of that. I mean, just look at this. Just look at this conference, right? I mean, Jeff was telling me just this morning, people were wanting to come in here and talk about the return to the moon. I think people are excited about this. And I think they're excited for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's not just the moon. It's a next step, right? And it really is not just the moon. We still have that work we're going to do for Mars. And when you look at Mars, we've got some long poles that we have to work on that allow us to get there. Intradescent landing, life support systems, radiation protection. We're still going to be working on those, right? We have to be working on those so that we can take those next steps in the 30s. And I've got teams that are really well lined up to do that. You know, somewhere deep down inside, I'm still an engineer, right? I guess you could call me a bureaucrat now, but somewhere there's an engineer in there. And I'm a propulsion guy, right? And I'm watching things like additive manufacturing. We're building engine parts with additive manufacturing, and we're testing them at ridiculous pressures and temperatures, and they're surviving, right? And they're doing great stuff. And that's going to these are the kind of game changing. I know this kind of additive is not new, but the application of it in some of the environments that we would have never thought about before is really, really important for us going forward. The 6P is, I think I'm on 6. I hope I didn't lose count here. Is partnerships, right? We are not going to do this by ourselves, right? Everything we're going to do from here on out is going to have public-private partnerships, international partnerships, partnerships with academia. It's too big of a job to not have that and not focus on that. And I think NASA has been at the forefront of how we're going to do partnerships. We've been doing this for a long time. This isn't new to us, but I'm very excited about that as we move forward. The last P, of course, for me is performance. So we got this. So I like to say the plate is set, right? There's food on that plate. It's time for us to eat. So we got to perform, right? We got to eat the food that's there in front of us, and we got to prove that we can perform as an agency and as a community. I think we've got the support right now of the administration. We got the support of Congress, and if we can show that we can do this, I think we'll have support for a long time. And that's tough when you're in this one-year environment, when you're trying to do multi-decadal programs like we're talking about here. But I do think we're okay. Can we do this? I absolutely believe we can do this as a team. But the bar is not low, right? We have set the bar pretty high for what we want to go do. But when I think about it, you know, the reward, you know, that pot of gold at the end of that rainbow is pretty awesome, and something that I think our team is ready to go do. So it's going to be a team of teams, and you know, it's going to work out just fine. And I think the leadership at NASA is ready to jump on this. We're ready to stand on the shoulders of folks like Harrison Schmidt, who got people like me involved in this business, and hopefully inspire that next generation to come on and take this great mission of exploration on. So thank you for being part of this, and thank you for being part of what we want to do as a nation and, frankly, as an international community. Thanks very much for your time.
We have about 5 minutes, and we can take maybe a couple of quick questions, if there are any, and there are a couple of our students with microphones. So if you have any, please raise your hand. Yeah. Wait a minute. Thanks.
I was wondering if you could address a little more how you're going to try to ensure the continuity of this project over the next year, the next decade, and beyond.
So that, from our perspective, the best way to ensure continuity is to have a consistent message and try not to change plans too much. Also, we need to perform. That gets to my performance piece. I think as long as we're performing and making the milestones that we say each year, and not just focusing on 2028, 2029, I need to focus on 2018, 2019, and 18 and 18, or 28 and 29 will come. So I think that's what we're pushing on our guys is that performance aspect of this. The other piece is just keeping our stakeholders informed of what we're doing and how that plays. So I mean, that's our plan going forward. What I found is that performance in hardware beats just about everything else. As long as you're building it and doing it on time, it'll be okay. That's what we're trying to do.
Is visiting an asteroid completely off the table?
Completely off the table. Well, we're visiting one like next year, right? Right. This year. Yeah, this year. Thank you, Jim. I think right now, yes, we're not planning on taking a human to an asteroid or bringing an asteroid back anymore. That's not what we're doing. But I think you know, when we're done with Bennu and OSIRIS-REx, that mission, you never know what that's going to do. As I love to say, every one of our science missions, all it does, while it might answer one question, it like opens like 20 more. And we'll be in that debate in terms of what we're going to do. I think Bennu will be a good teaser for us to see if that's something we want to go focus on in the future.
Hi, Steve Brody from ISU, the International Space University. Given USRA's hosting here, could you say a word about not only inspiring our next generation, but actively involving, especially the university communities, in the plans that you see ahead? Any more specifics that you'd like to share?
Several efforts that we do inside the agency. Science has, and I'm going to butcher the name of it, but I know Science sponsors several activities. The space technology guys have the research research graduate program. That's probably not the right title, so don't get mad at me. And I think in aeronautics we have several fellowships that we do throughout the university system as well. The challenge for us is maintaining that budget, right, as we go through. On the education side, the office continues to try to work with through MUREP, EPSCoR, space grant process. That's the way we try to do that. Now that gets challenged every year, as you see, but it also gets put back in every year, and I'm pretty confident we'll continue to do that. The Hill and even the administration recognizes the value of those programs to getting that next generation moving. We also, frankly, depend a lot on our industry partners to help us with this. Several of our partners in industry are fantastic with what they sponsor at universities, and it's important for them too. They need that workforce just like we do going forward. So I think that's just keeping those programs going and looking at how we can expand them is something that we continually look at. We're always trying to do that. One of the things we're really focusing on now is trying to make sure our education activities through the education office are really aligned with this direction. Because if you think, and from a NASA perspective, we can have a pretty wide aperture of what we want to do, and so we're really trying to focus it so that we get the right STEM, get the STEM workforce ready to go in the areas that we think we're going to need going forward. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, as those of you who saw an earlier version, Jan Werner, Director General of the European Space Agency, ESA, is unfortunately for us in Paris and busy this week, had volunteered to do a short video of introduction, but he went one better and invited Dave Parker, who is head of robotics and human exploration for ESA, and who is here, as opposed to in Paris, to join us and give remarks this morning. Dave began his career with British Aerospace as a guidance, navigation, and control engineer. He was head of that, guidance, control, navigation at Marconi Space. Later worked with the UK Department of Trade and Industry as Assistant Director for BNSA, British National Space Centre. 2012 became Chief Executive of the UK Space Agency, continued to lead the UK delegation to ESA under his present appointment. And Dave graduated from the University of Southampton with degrees in aeronautics and astronautics, including a PhD, and we welcome you, Dave, here to the podium. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, thank you for the invitation to speak. It's great to be here. Just before Christmas, I was also asked to replace Jan at a speech at the Space Policy Institute, a dinner event. And then immediately beforehand, Jan decided he was coming. So I'm just checking he's not going to walk through the door any moment. So, but anyway, I send greetings from him, and let me start with a clear personal statement. Sustained human surface exploration will start on the moon. This is personally something I've never had a doubt about, and let me offer you some background and rationale, assisted by the odd slide or two. So it starts like this. One of the most fundamental human characteristics is a relentless curiosity that drives us to investigate the unknown. Throughout our history, we have looked beyond apparent boundaries to the mysteries that lie beyond. Compelled to explore, to understand and use the world in which we find ourselves, We have spread across continents and oceans. We have probed the farthest reaches of our planet, the frozen poles, the deep oceans, the high atmosphere. And with intent and determination, we are resolved to explore our nearest companions, going beyond low Earth orbit to the Moon, Mars, and maybe beyond. Our goal is not a few quick visits, but rather sustained and ultimately self-sufficient human presence beyond Earth, supported by robotic pathfinders. Robust science and technology efforts, such as the pursuit of space exploration, helps to define nations and their place in the world. The number of countries involved in space exploration is continually growing, and we are entering a new era of historic significance in which we will extend human presence beyond Earth's orbit physically and culturally. And the Moon will be the first place where humans learn to live on another celestial body. As a repository of 4 billion years of solar system history and as a place to observe the Earth and its universe, and it has great potential. Exploration of the Moon will also reveal whether resources available in space will allow humans to live off the land. We can also test technologies needed for human missions to Mars and beyond. Now, lunar scientific exploration, and this is a research seminar this afternoon to some extent, will involve 3 types of investigations: science of the Moon, science from the Moon, and science on the Moon. Science of the Moon, which involves lunar geology, and there's some geologists here, great, geochemistry, geophysics, will help us understand the history of the Moon. Current theory suggests that the Moon was created when a body the size of Mars struck the young Earth, throwing vaporized rock into Earth's orbit. This material may be later coalesced into the Moon, but theory is not proof, and we need proof. The Moon is also an invaluable witness of so much of solar system history. It has recorded this history perhaps more completely and more clearly than any other planetary body. For example, did the comets and meteorites that bombarded the early Earth and the Moon in their history contain the building blocks of life? The answer may be preserved in the pristine surface of the Moon. And to make more sense of the data encoded on the Moon, we may need both extensive robotic exploration and sophisticated surveying by humans at sites of high scientific interest. Science from the Moon will take advantage of the Moon's lack of atmosphere and its radio-quiet environment to provide a stable platform for observing the universe. For example, astronomers are interested in constructing a lunar-based low-frequency radio telescope to see signals emanating from the formation of the first stars billions of years ago, and to do that alongside gravitational wave observatories and high-energy astrophysics observatories will be a powerful set of tools for the astronomers of the next generation. Science on the Moon will investigate the effects of the lunar environment on robotic instruments, equipment, and humans. Exposure on the lunar surface to low gravity, radiation, dust, micrometeorites, and wide variations in temperature will pose numerous challenges for the engineering scientists. Understanding these effects will also enable engineers to develop materials and design systems for long-term use by humans in this hostile environment. To sustain human presence beyond Earth, we must learn from science on the Moon how to live and work on other celestial bodies. A critical step will be to determine whether we can use the Moon's resources. For example, the ability to extract material from the lunar soil might provide not only drinkable water and breathable air for the crew's life support systems, but maybe building materials and perhaps even raw materials for fuel for spacecraft. Another priority will be to build on the experience from the International Space Station, to develop efficient recycling systems, to reduce the use of consumables and what we have to take to the Moon, the logistics supply chain, so things like air, power, water, so on. This work may well bring benefits to humanity back here on Earth. And finally, it's incumbent upon us to consider the lunar environment is both fragile and special. We must protect and preserve it even as we explore and use it. And this will be a challenge. But the Moon, as our closest natural space station, is the ideal place for humanity to develop the capability to journey to Mars and beyond. Only a few days away traveling time from Earth compared with a minimum 6 months for Mars. The communications delay of only 1.5 seconds and compared with tens of minutes. And the development of transportation, life support, habitation systems, and advanced robots can all be attempted in the challenging environment of the moon before they're used further away. Human explorers will also use the moon to develop their skills and learn how to prepare their bodies and their minds for the long journey ahead. Now, the thing about the moon is it has a strong place in the culture of the peoples around the world. You'll find it represented one way or another in many different cultures. It's the only celestial body that is familiar to humanity as a place and not just a point of light. It's a place, moreover, that more humans, we hope, will aspire to visit in the future. So just as the first human landings nearly 50 years ago enthralled an earlier generation, I believe that lunar exploration in the years to come will continue to inspire an enthusiasm and creativity among future generations around this globe. But compared with the early days of lunar exploration, the more sophisticated media, and yes, even the social media of today, will create novel means to relate the exploration journey to all people. In particular, children can be involved and will be inspired to become the explorers of the future as scientists, engineers, teachers, entrepreneurs. And anyone should be able to participate personally in lunar robotic exploration through virtual presence technologies. People will expect high definition, 3D, even holographic telepresence. End of quote. Most of the words I've just spoken were written by a team of space agency colleagues around the world towards the end of 2006. And they form the basis of sustainable exploration being a challenge that no one nation could do on its own. It's why the 14 agencies at that time developed the so-called Global Exploration Strategy, the framework for coordination. It's still on the NASA website if you want to go and find it. It presented a vision for robotic and human space exploration, focusing on destinations within the solar system where we may one day live and work. It elaborated an action plan to share the strategies and efforts of individual nations so that all can achieve their exploration goals more effectively and more safely. So this framework did not propose a single global program, but rather it recommended a voluntary, non-binding forum, which became the International Space Exploration Coordination Group. And the third edition of the ISAAC Global Exploration Roadmap has just been published. And so again, go and take a look at that on the website. But I must admit, when I was involved in helping write the framework document in 2007, I would have been disappointed that we're not already closer to achieving the vision. But the vision is still there, and let's focus on the future. So this is supposed to be an international perspective, so I bring an international perspective from Europe. On our side, the first step has been to develop a European exploration strategy endorsed by our ministers at their Council of Ministers at the end of 2014. And the second step has been to merge the various different human and robotic exploration programs within ESA into a single program, a so-called envelope program. So this we call cunningly the European Exploration Envelope Program, or E3P, and this was agreed at the Council of Ministers at the end of 2016. It's not about Moon versus Mars, or about robots versus humans, but rather a holistic vision of stepwise exploration. We aim to maximize the synergies and maximize the benefits for science, for society, for the economy, and international relations. Basically, we've been trying to get our house in order so that we can contribute to the original vision of 2007 and the re-energized vision that we've heard presented by Robert Lightfoot earlier today. The time feels like it's right. So what's in our own program back in ESA? I'm not going to go into great detail, but it has various elements that are underway. And the key thing is everything we do is an international cooperation, and there is no stronger and more important cooperation than the one we have with the United States, with NASA. So, of course, we're continuing to work aboard the space station. We're continuing to do science aboard the space station. The next European contribution, a new instrument to study the upper atmosphere, will be launched by a NASA vehicle next Monday, on Easter Monday. So that cooperation continues. We're hard at work, and I should have put a picture showing the latest status of the European service module that will provide the power and propulsion for the Orion vehicle to propel it into deep space. We're working on search for life on Mars, so on. But as we're planning our future projects, I want to just mention the ones that are related to the moon as I come towards the end. We're working with our Russian partners on a sequence of missions starting in 2020 with Lunar Glob, and in 2023 with the Lunar Resource Lander. This will use a European precision navigation system and a European drill and sample analysis system to get below the surface of the South Polar regions. An international cooperation. We were hoping to engage and participate in the Lunar Orbital Platform. It's an idea that was developed in international partnership, and it has great benefits as a way of preparing to reach back down to the surface of the moon with robots and later with humans. Again, it has great scientific potential. We had a scientific workshop in Europe, a call for ideas at the end of 2017, a workshop, and produced a report with the ideas coming out of that. Literally 100 ideas were put forward by the scientific community. We're also interested in novel commercial partnerships for lunar exploration. So we have our European ideas in terms of transportation and a phone home service if you want to get your payload or your CubeSat to lunar orbit. Ideas beyond that looking towards in situ resource utilization. But in this case, again, to stimulate the commercial exploration world, ESA is interested in buying a ticket to the lunar surface for our payload rather than building a lander. And also ideas that we're working on with our Japanese and Canadian partners on a human lunar precursor, a regional rover that could deploy to the surface of the moon and return samples up to the Deep Space Gateway, to create a programmatic linkage between robotic and human exploration. These are all solid projects and also concepts that we're working on for the future. All of this only makes sense in an international context. So a word about international cooperation. It's in the DNA of the European Space Agency, beginning with our founding organizations back in 1962. We have 22 member states, a formal partnership with Canada, and bilateral relationships with agencies all around the world. And so how to work in international partnership is something that we can bring to the table, I think. We want to maximize the cooperation between all of the actors that were mentioned and the objective of this workshop this afternoon: government, industry, the research community, and the international dimension as well. But also even private citizens. No one has a unique advantage of knowledge, capability, insight. Frankly, there's too much to be done in exploring the moon and beyond for anyone to be excluded. It would be a self-defeating goal. It's the logic why my boss, Jan Werner, conceived this notion of the Moon Village, an open concept to encourage everyone with an interest to contribute their ideas, capabilities, and ambitions to the sustainable exploration of the moon. Now, some people have misunderstood this, and I say quite often I see on news coverage on this side of the Atlantic as a specific project to build a moon base. It is not. It is not. That's not to say that in my organization, the lunar architects have ideas for a lunar base. Yes, of course, we do. How to use the lunar regolith, how to build a lunar facility. But this is not Moon Village. And I take the opportunity. It's not as grand either than this 1970s vision. Anyone recognize this? Does that help? This is not what Moon Village is about. Moon Village is a way of working together. It's exchanging ideas to contribute to a global project, by bringing stakeholders together to share ideas, needs, and offers. It's an open concept. It's a concept where everyone could contribute in whatever way is appropriate. It may be a university, it may be a single citizen, as well as space agencies. And I can kind of give you the flavor of what it means by a simple example, which is supposing different organizations can make contributions, they have offers, they have capabilities they can contribute to lunar exploration. And equally, other organizations have requests, ideas, things they want to do. Think of this as a kind of brokering activity, and this is exactly what has happened. There are dozens and dozens of organizations that are now participating in contributing their ideas, their ambitions, and working together. And there is even a Moon Village Association. This innovative initiative should be understood as existing over and above the classical projects carried out by ESA. It's not something we spend money on. It's a role of the space agency to bring different players, actors, organizations together. It's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking which can contribute to the overall goal of lunar exploration, and I hope something you can take account of in the further deliberations this afternoon. And I would say you only need to see the open sessions hosted by Jan Werner at the IAC and elsewhere to see how this galvanizes people's emotions and creativity, and especially young people. And I'm convinced that this type of grassroots engagement is one element, just one element, of what we need to sustain a long-term endeavor, including the return to the moon. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Again, I think we have time for a couple of quick questions, and please raise your hand and let our students know, and if you have any.
Stun them.
You did, but you clarified a lot of things with the explanation of the moon. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you.
How does Brexit affect your
You noticed I have an English accent, perhaps. Is that it? Okay. Important thing, European Space Agency is an intergovernmental organization. It's like NATO or CERN, the Nuclear Research Organization, or OECD. So the UK continues to be and will continue to be a strong member of the European Space Agency. And in fact, the last ESA ministerial increased its financial contributions to ESA.
Thank you so much.